Everyone, welcome back to Front Page Bets. It's the FPBcast. Gerry, Ahern, Mike Szvetitz, and Gerry. We're into November, halfway through the NFL season. 5 weeks left in the regular season for college football. And man, what a weekend it was on really both. I didn't think the NFL had a lot of games that could really make a lot of differences this past weekend, but it turned out it did. And then college football, 3 top 6 teams losing, 2 undefeated teams going down in Tennessee and Clemson, shaking up the college football playoff a little bit. The second rankings come out Tuesday night this week. So there's a lot going on in college football, a lot going on in the NFL, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's recap the college football weekend real quick, Gerry. What stood out to you? Obviously, the Georgia-Tennessee game was the top bill. Georgia wins between the hedges. It wasn't even really close, to be honest. Tennessee looked overmatched. Georgia just looks, they look like the national champion. They look like the defending national champion. That game and any other game that caught your eye this past weekend?
Yeah, I think it starts with Georgia. I think they proved to everybody that they're the team to beat for the national championship. Defending champions handily handled Tennessee without much trouble at all. Stetson Bennett looked really good, both running and throwing the football. The defense is sound, despite losing all those guys to the first round of the NFL draft. They're the team to beat, I think, by a pretty wide margin. Let's talk about LSU and Brian Kelly showing heart and getting the glory against Alabama, going for 2 in OT very decisively. I got to admit, I didn't think the Brian Kelly experiment was going to work that well. He's proven me wrong and others. How about Notre Dame? Speaking of Brian Kelly, routing Clemson, likely ending Dabo's playoff hopes. TCU, the team that sort of just keeps winning in the shadows, they rally past Texas Tech. And, they are a force to be reckoned with at this point. Ohio State looks crummy in the wind at Northwestern. Barely gets a win there, but actually, probably solidifies itself given some of the other stuff that went on. And then you got Michigan looking a little shaky at the beginning and then kicking the tar out of Rutgers. They may be better than Ohio State. So who's the Big Ten representative going to be? A lot to unpack for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot. We see, I think it's Georgia than everybody else. I really think, we said that in the beginning of the year when they beat Oregon. And oh, by the way, Oregon making a run now. They look like world beaters with Bo Nix piloting them, who's jumped in the Heisman conversation as well. So, we knew in the beginning of the season, especially after that Oregon win, that Georgia was, hey, who can hang with them? Then they struggled against Missouri. They haven't really, but their offense is so efficient and underrated, but it's almost as good, and it showed it was better than Tennessee's number 1 offense this past weekend. And obviously the Georgia defense, Tennessee ran up into a buzzsaw. It just you go down there and it's hard to win in Athens at Sanford Stadium, but also Hendon Hooker looked a little off. His receivers weren't making the plays that they normally make. Struggled running the ball. Georgia's defense just had an answer for everything. But that LSU Alabama game too. Who would have thought that Kelly at home, you go for 2, that's some stones right there, doing that in overtime. Because if you lose that game, you don't make it. Now you're the GOAT, right? You're not the good GOAT, you're the bad GOAT. And you're getting, and Saban.
I think he so desperately wanted to beat Nick Saban for the first time that he was like, this is my chance. I'm going to take it. What do I have to lose? They're going to rip me if, I don't go for it.
Exactly.
And, I got to give the guy credit. I've always thought he was a good football coach. I think he's a little bit unsettling on the sidelines, particularly the way that he talks to players.
Yeah.
But you can't dispute the fact that he's one of the top coaches in the nation.
And this is the first time in a long time that Alabama really is out of the national championship conversation. Now, some stuff could happen. You still got 3 weeks. Georgia could forget how to play football. Ole Miss, it's a big game this weekend. If Alabama wants to keep its hope alive with Ole Miss and Alabama going to Oxford. Also, Lane Kiffin, the Lane Train, and the Rebels down there, they have a chance. Now they have the inside track on the SEC West. They could play spoiler to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Not getting too far ahead of ourselves, but, Alabama right now is, 2 losses. That's been years and years since we've seen that out of Nick Saban's crew, but there's still, again, people love Alabama. The voters love Alabama. We'll see what happens. But right now, if the season were to end today, you got Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. Who's the 4th team? Is it TCU? Is it the only other undefeated, Power 5 conference team? Or is it Oregon? Is it USC? Who is it?
For me right now, it's TCU, and it's even more so TCU if they go to Texas this weekend
Right.
as a 7-point dog and take care of business there. If they do, I think they're in pretty good shape, depending on obviously what goes on with the Big Ten teams. I mean, obviously Michigan and Ohio State play themselves,
Yeah.
in a final regular season game in Columbus, which I think has got to favor Ohio State just for that reason. But I mean, TCU, you gotta give Dice credit for what he's got done there.
Yeah.
Dual threat quarterback who just makes plays. Defense does just enough to get things done in a year that has been disappointing by Alabama standards, by Clemson standards, by Notre Dame standards. This could be the team that sneaks in there. I'm not so sure about Oregon or USC. I was big on USC earlier.
Right.
They've sort of come back to earth a little bit with so many new people working together, both on offense and defense. That was my concern at the very beginning of the season. We've seen a little bit of that, but I mean, TCU's got a big opportunity this weekend, and I think that's kind of the marquee game.
They sure do. Going to Texas, going into Austin. And Texas played tough in the beginning of the year against Alabama. They're that team that you just don't know who's going to show up for Sarkisian, freshman quarterback who's been hurt back. TCU has a chance to really stamp in what they could be this weekend on the road. And I don't know if it's too late for an ACC team with a one-loss ACC team. You would think a one-loss SEC team could make it, maybe even a one-loss Big Ten team. ACC Clemson falling to Notre Dame. Now you got North Carolina with one loss. Could they get in? You've got a big game for UNC this week on the road at Wake. They're dogs in Wake Forest and Winston-Salem. You've also got a team that struggled against a Virginia team that they should have beaten by 30, and they barely get by the Cavaliers there on Saturday. So out of those games, what we're looking at, Alabama, my top three games coming in this weekend: Alabama at Ole Miss. Basically for the SEC West, you would think.
I'd given 11.5.
It's crazy. Unbelievable. TCU at Texas, which Texas is a 7-point favorite, and
Correct.
then you got UNC at Wake. So all your home teams are except for Ole Miss, you got Texas and Wake lower ranked below the teams are facing as favorites. It could be not a great schedule for the top 25 across the board, but those three teams, I think right there, that's going to tell a lot with only 3 weeks to play in the regular season.
Well, I think something else that's going to tell you a lot is Georgia again this week, up at Mississippi State, given 16.5.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about trap games or letdowns or what have you. That isn't going to happen in Georgia. Georgia's going to cover that big spot. I know I've been wrong about those big numbers a couple of times this season, but I feel good about that one.
Well, Mississippi State almost choked one out against Auburn. They were up, by 3 scores, in the first half, and Mike Leach is over there on the sideline folding up chairs, doesn't want his receivers to sit down because they forgot to play football. So Mississippi State, it's the same as kind of like Ole Miss. You just they have the personality of their coach. You just don't know what you're going to get when they show up on the field. And, if Ole Miss, if Lane Kiffin can beat Nick Saban at home and go to the SEC championship game, man, they might build a statue to him outside of Von Hemingway Stadium.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know that Alabama's going to cover either. I think that's going to be a tight finish.
We'll see. I would love to see Ole Miss pull that one out and head to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. So 3 weeks left in the regular season for college football, halfway through the NFL season, Jared. And again, games that I thought were going to be, ho-hum, snoozers turned into be not only really good games, but also we saw some teams fall that should have won. And I'm, Josh Allen in Buffalo, I'm pointing at you. Going into the Jets, double digit, I think it was 13-point favorites going into that game, and they lose. They were up by 11 and choke away the lead. Now, Allen got a little hurt. His elbow, the replay of that did not look great. Finishes the game. They're checking him out this week. There's been no real decision on, really no talk about what actually it is and how severe it is. But man, what about the Jets?
big win, right? Coming back after getting in a hole to the Bills. You mentioned the Allen injury, which definitely bears watching. That's already taken the line down a little bit for this week. But you got to give the Jets credit. They held up at home. They punched the bully, the backyard bully in the mouth.
Yep.
Came away with the win. I never saw that one coming. I didn't even think they would cover, to be honest. So that was a big, big win for the Jets.
Right. And then you've got, another team. Oh, by the way, Seattle Seahawks, first place in the NFC West. They beat Arizona, which, wasn't, Arizona, I think, were 2.5 when the game dropped, favorites. The Seahawks, but what Pete Carroll's doing there with Geno Smith. Obviously, the Eagles, they beat the Texans on Thursday night, didn't cover, but still remain undefeated. Giants were off. Dallas was off. They're back this week. That NFC East right there is, you got 3 top teams. The Commanders fall to the Vikings. And oh, by the way, Kirk Cousins now has led the Vikings 6 straight wins.
7-1.
7-1. They're top of the NFC North. And they've got a game against Josh Allen and the Bills this weekend, which is probably the top game in the NFL as we get into week 10.
I mean, Kirk Cousins is another guy who I've maligned on this podcast, has done nothing but win and come up big. I mean, you can say, oh, well, it's just Washington and they're playing with a backup quarterback and yada, yada, yada. But they have taken care of business. The offensive tools they have in Jefferson and Cook, are amazing. They picked up TJ Hawkinson from the Lions.
It's a big pickup.
It's a big addition. I like them a lot to potentially win the NFC at this point. I never thought I'd say that, much like I never thought I'd say Brian Kelly would vindicate himself in the SEC. So, you got to have some humility in this game. And Kirk Cousins has humbled me. Speaking of humility, holy cats, the Green Bay Packers getting just punched in the gut by the Detroit Lions in the Motor City. Rodgers is yelling and screaming at everyone. Maybe should be looking in the mirror. 3 picks.
Yeah.
Some of them were just bad throws. You can talk about, young receivers and this and that, but at some point there's got to be some introspection there.
Yep.
And the ageless Tom Brady having just enough to pull it out against the Rams and Stafford, defending Super Bowl champions, look like they're finished.
Yeah. They don't look good.
The Bucs kind of hang on,
Yeah, and the Bucs now tied for first or in first in the NFC South. You mentioned the Packers in that division. The Vikings lead that division. Everybody else, I mean, good gracious. And then 5 losses in a row for the Packers. They lose to the Commanders. They lose to the Lions. Who else did they lose to? They shouldn't have lost to. I mean, the worst teams in football, and or at least comparatively and traditionally. And Aaron Rodgers, you've got your best player in Aaron Jones as your running back, and he only.
They should have lost the game to the Patriots too.
Right. Why you don't have receivers? You ran the ball well last week against Buffalo. Why don't you continue to run the football? They don't run the football. They force it downfield. Rodgers is making bad decisions, trying to win everything. He's his throwing motion and everything. He's kind of like falling back anyway. That's just been his style.
Well, that tackle to Bakhtiari, was wide open, and he just short armed it.
Exactly, and he's relying on that.
You got to give Aiden Hutchinson the credit for snuffing that one out a little bit. But
great play.
My gosh, that just looked like a bad backyard Thanksgiving.
Afternoon
game after too much turkey and a few too many Miller Lights.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think about Aaron Rodgers is for so long he had that arm talent and still has arm talent. Don't get me wrong, but how much do they miss playmakers like Devontae Adams that can?
Oh, they do.
Make
but
those
I mean,
plays.
Again, you can't go blaming everybody else all the time when you're not taking care of business yourself. Right. I think Matt LaFleur is intimidated by Rodgers as well, and you talk about, you can run the ball with an A.J. Dillon or whatever, then run the ball if you're not getting it done from a, passing game standpoint, especially against the Detroit Lions, whose defense is like Swiss cheese for the most part.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. And one of my prop bets that I wrote about was Aaron Jones plus 14.5.
Aaron Jones.
He doesn't even get half of those. And they lose when you can take the air out of the football, especially with no receivers and run the football, run the ball. But yeah, and now you get a Chicago team also. Let's talk about the Bears for a second. Justin Fields, the most rushing yards by a quarterback in NFL history.
And he's not even really a running quarterback.
Who? That's going to be a trivia question in 20 years, and people are going to go, who?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I think Justin Fields should get the Purple Heart for the way he gets knocked around under that horrific line, but they're finding a way to kind of keep things going, making deals, in free agency or what have you to get ready and get some picks.
Right.
Chicago Bears are going to be heard from eventually, but they're going to take their licks, especially Justin Fields for now.
Yeah. And you want to talk about a game now? They're favored against the Lions at home this weekend. I got the Lions. I got the Lions winning that game straight up, even though they're 2.5-point dogs. I just don't know if the Chicago can keep it up. And if you're the Lions and you're healthy, with Swift healthy, Goff not making bad decisions, you get Sanamon back a little bit. Like, I think that
what scares me about that game is Goff, because he did sort of look like he was reverting to some bad decisions in that Green Bay game. I mean, offensively, the Lions have proven Amon-Ra St. Brown is a tremendous receiver. You mentioned Swift. They still can make some plays and have some guys who can do some things. Jared Goff had been looking good, but he looked like he had a little bit of regression to me in that win over Green Bay.
Yeah, he needs to play well, at least manage the game. And I think Detroit can beat some teams. I got them beating Chicago. I've got the Bills beating the Vikings, but not covering the 6 points. I think the Vikings, going on the road with the 12th man up there in Buffalo, but I like the.
How bad is the elbow though? That's what you got to wonder.
Right.
That one scares me a little bit. I mean, ulnar ligament, if it's really that, and it's going to be impinged or whatever, that's huge for a quarterback. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. But right now, early in the week, I like the Bills. Now that could change definitely if Allen is out or how much that hurts him lingering effects. I've got Philly's an 11-point favorite over Washington. San Francisco's a 7-point. You've seen a lot of big numbers, but this week I'm going with 7 home favorites to win chalk all the way through. So last week it was the underdogs. This week I'm going with the favorites at home. Kind of just the way things are shaping up. We're going into week 10 of the season. I think we know who we've got to play with, and there's some not great games here. But when you look at Tampa Bay, you look at Kansas City at home against Jacksonville at 9.5. You look at Miami against the Browns at home. You got to go. At least me, I'm going with the home favorite, just because I don't think Jacksonville can go on the road and beat Kansas City, or at least hang within double digits. Nor can I say that about Houston at New York Giants or Cleveland at Miami.
I definitely like the Eagles, and given the points against the Commanders, I think they, keep their perfect streak going. I really like the Cowboys given 5 in Green Bay. I think, it's kind of funny, the Fox promos are trying to bring back memories of the Ice Bowl and when the game mattered. I mean, Green Bay is in shambles right now, and I don't see it being corrected against a pretty darn good Dallas team.
Yeah, Dallas has figured it out with Dak back, their defense, and if Ezekiel Elliott can get back healthy, we'll see on that. But Tony Pollard, on the backup, I like Dallas a lot. In this season, in the NFC. I mean, the NFC East again. Who's going to get left out? Could they get 3 teams in with the extra wild card now? So we don't know. It's going to be
would have thought that at the beginning of the year. We've learned a lot so far this season.
We sure have. And I'm riding with the Jets and the Falcons against the spread until the cows come home, because they've done me well so far. So we're going to go. It doesn't matter who the Falcons are playing or who the Jets are playing. I might not take them straight up, but I'm taking them against the spread 100% because they've been money for me. So,
how was your record this week?
My record was, let's see, it was 7-5-1 against the spot, 9-4 straight up. So now I'm back to 500 for the season, 66-4 against the spot. I'll take it.
I've given myself a lot of heat this year, but the one thing I've done well on is my best bets. I was 3-1 for another week on the season. I'm well above 500. I think I had 1 week where I went 0-4, which killed me. But other than that, I've been killing it. Against the spread last week in a tough week with a lot of big numbers. I wound up being 11-9, which surprised me a little bit. 15-5 straight up. The things I didn't have was I didn't have Notre Dame or Clemson. I didn't think Ohio State would struggle with Northwestern and not cover. Those are the big, and of course Alabama. I really thought Nick Saban would get it done at LSU, but all in all, not a bad week given some of the seismic movement that was going on the field.
No question. My top 10 college football picks were not good. We're not even going to talk about my record. I think TCU was the only team that I actually had.
They had to come back. Like I was sitting there in the early going, mid afternoon Saturday thinking, boy, this is going to be embarrassing to have to talk about this. But fortunately, some teams rallied for me.
They did, and Tennessee falling to Georgia, that helped the sports book out because I think it was 80-something% were on Tennessee to beat Georgia. And so, the week before, the sports book took a bath in the NFL. They get it back in college football this week.
I mean, that was the game to me that I felt pretty confident with Georgia. I mean, especially playing at home. Nothing against Tennessee, obviously offensively, but given how good Georgia's defense is, I just felt like at Sanford Stadium, with everything riding on that game, that they would be pretty comfortable, and they were. I'm surprised they dispatched them as easily as they did. I thought the spot was a little high.
Yeah.
But, like I said, I think Georgia is head and shoulders the number one team in college football. And, when they had that struggle against Missouri and they had the number one spot taken away from them, I thought that was a little premature. I think we saw the reason why that was true on Saturday.
Yeah. And the fact that the college football playoff ranking, the initial one, had them third.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
So,
I mean, the college football playoff committee, it's like, where do they find these people?
We need to put ourselves in the running for that, get appointed to the czar of college football here and make sure that we get some, because obviously, well, we know what we're talking about, and you can find it out every week on the FPBcast here at FrontPageBets.com. Gerry Ahern, I'm Mike Szvetitz. We're going to wrap up next week. We'll wrap up this second week of November, and we're going to make sure that we get everything ready as we push into college football with the last 2 weeks after this weekend, going into championship weekends and the NFL. Who's going to separate? Who's going to come back to the pack? We'll have it all here at Front Page Bets. Thanks for watching.